Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and it's a bit overdue, but here it is, my review of the iFi Pro iCAN Signature Edition Hybrid Solid State and Vacuum Tube Headphone Amplifier, or at least switchable between fully solid state and hybrid vacuum tube and solid state headphone amplifier. This is a $2,249 US product. It is a loan to me by a friend of the channel. I have had it a good while and I need to get this review out. So that's what we're going to do in this video. I have seen some reviews of this, haven't watched them, but have seen in my YouTube feed that there are some reviews of this out recently that have been quite positive, or at least in their titles they have been quite positive. Does it deserve that kind of positivity? Stick with me here after shameless self-promotion to find out.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
All right, so again, $2,249 US definitely puts it into like high-end headphone amplifier territory. Now, this is a very feature-packed unit. So let's go over some specs and some features, and then we'll look at the build, and then of course we will get into sound and all of that. So being a headphone amplifier, its primary job is to, drive headphones, and it has, at least by spec, a lot of power. From the balanced output, iFi's website claims 14 watts per channel, not 14 milliwatts, 14 watts per channel, although they do not say at which impedance that that output is capable. But that's really high, even at any normal kind of headphone impedance. So a lot of power on tap there. From the single-ended output, they claim 4,800 milliwatts, which is 4.8 watts per channel, which is still pretty hefty, okay, in there. So, and they also, I don't have the distortion numbers in front of me, but they claim low distortion, as all amp makers do these days and all of that. So what makes this unit special and intriguing is just that it's got a lot of things going on with it. So let's talk about that. First thing to notice is we have this vacuum tube stuck in here. This is a General Electric new old stock 5670 vacuum tube built in here. And that is there because you have the option of running this amp in fully solid state mode, completely bypassing the tube. And then you have two levels of tube engagement. So it has a vacuum tube on the preamp stage in this thing, and two levels at which you can engage the tubery. So how much tube harmonics do you want to inject into the sound? Okay, you have two settings for that. So that's a really unique feature that I don't know of anywhere else in headphone ampery, that you have the option to do that. So that's a pretty cool idea, and we'll talk in the sound section about how well they pulled that off. Other things of note is we have two analog domain circuits here that have a couple of different functions. One is we have what they call a 3D feature here, and that is a crossfeed circuit in here. What crossfeed does is it takes a little bit of, say, the signal in the left channel and feeds it into the right channel, and vice versa. And the reason that it does that is to take what is a binaural listening experience from headphones, where you can have information that all goes into one ear and never gets to the other, okay, in either direction, and stereoizes it, basically. What I mean by that is like when you have speakers in a room, both ears can hear both speakers. It's just that your right ear hears the right speaker first, and then the left speaker a little bit later and at a little bit lower pitch. All of that because the sound waves have to bend around your head or travel through your head or things of that nature. And it works the same with the left ear and the left and right speaker there that way too. And another thing that can happen is in a lot of old music, particularly when stereo sound was first being invented and explored, is they would do these really, they would do hard pans a lot, where they would hard pan all of the instruments to one speaker and all of the vocals to the other, or something like that. And when you're listening with headphones, and you have a sound coming out of only one side, it has this kind of weird pressure effect on that one side where sound is happening and not on the other. That is very uncomfortable and very unnatural. So crossfeed puts a little bit of the signal of one channel into the other to make it like more natural, and it can help with soundstage and all of that. And so what they have done with this crossfeed circuit is give you several different settings for the amount at which that happens. Okay, the other thing that they do here is they have an X-Bass bass boost. And the way this works is I believe it is a 12 decibel bump increase in bass output that is centered on either 10 hertz, 20 hertz, or 40 hertz, or is off. Meaning that you'll get this hump in the frequency response that I believe is 12 decibels high, and the center of that hump is on any of those frequencies that I just named. So it's not really that you get to increase the amount of bass by a specific amount that you want, it's that you get a parametric increase, and then you just move where that amount is centered. Okay. The other thing that we see here on the front side is just a lot of other switches and outputs. So this switch right here has 3 stages, and this is where you go either fully solid state mode and then, or select between the 2 tube modes right here. Over here is we have a gain switch where we have a 0 dB, a 9 dB, and an 18 dB gain, which basically just means low, medium, high gain essentially. And then we have 1, 2, 3, like we have up to 5 places to plug headphones in. We have a 3.5 millimeter single-ended output right here. We have a 4.4 millimeter balanced Pentacon output right here. We have 4-pin XLR balanced output here. And then we've got these connectors right here, which can be either a dual 3-pin XLR connector, or you can put 1/4 inch TR, I believe TR or TRS plugs in there too, if you wish that way. Okay, that's just the front panel. There was a lot to talk about there. Let's look at the back. On the back, we see that we have a full complement of both balanced and single-ended inputs and outputs. So we have one set of balanced 3-pin XLR inputs, and then we have 3 pair of RCA single-ended stereo inputs. Then we have an XLR and RCA pair each of preamp outputs on this thing as well. We have an ESL link, which I believe is iFi's primary proprietary connector for something. I don't really know. I failed to look into that. I'm sorry, but I can link to their website. You can read up on that. And then we have a 15 volt 4 amp DC input and then a DC loop output, which I think you could run that like into their Pro IDSD DAC and power both of those off of the same power supply. So on that subject, let's look at the power supply. It is the iFi Power Elite linear power supply. Looks like this, has an interesting shape to it, is terminated in this DC plug style here, accepts like a normal kind of power input there, and is rated at a, where is it, a 15 volt 3.5 amp output. All right, so that's a lot there. And then the other thing that I want to talk about, or another thing I want to talk about the build here, is that there are no feet on the base of the unit. We just get this like rubber sheet, rubber pad here, if you will, that isn't all that sticky. And so while the unit has a little bit of weight to it, it is not particularly heavy. I did notice that this slides around on a desktop a lot when you're trying to plug things in and pull them out. Like it could be stickier on the desk and slide around a bit less. So that's something to keep in mind, is that when you go to put a headphone cable into this or pull it out, you're going to need to put a little bit more pressure on the top so you don't slide this thing across the desk. Okay, but other than that, the build quality is good. It's a compact unit, all of that. the website does not say whether it's Class A, Class B, Class D, anything like that. They call it a fully differential balanced amplifier or something. Again, I will link to the website. You can look into that. What we're going to talk mostly about here in just a moment is the sound. Okay, so I think actually we are ready to do that. Oh, I should note that it's just cool that the different tube settings like glow different colors in here. So I'll get a good shot of the colors for the thumbnail. There we go. I might darken the room and let that light up a little bit. We'll see. Okay, so let's transition to sound then. And we'll talk about test gear. Now this has been in my room for a very long time now. And I have used it with a variety of different DACs. So DACs that I know that I have plugged into this would be my Berkeley Alpha Series 2. Denafrips Pontus 2, the original, both with the original firmware and the first firmware update to the 12th anniversary edition in there. Let's see. What else has been plugged into this? Lampezator Amber 3, got some time in there. Denafrips Aries 12th Anniversary Edition. Shit Bifrost 2/64. What else have I tried? The Gustard R26. Trying to remember all of it. Again, it's been here a while. But that's enough to get us started, right? That's a good sampling of the different DACs that I have tried here. And then as far as headphones that I've plugged into this thing, original Focal Utopia, HiFiMan Susvara, HiFiMan HE1000 SE. Let's see, what else have been in there? I'm pretty sure the Rossen Rad Zero got plugged into this thing. And we'll go ahead and stop there. There have been more. It's hard to remember given how long this has been here, but again, a sampling there. So that was one system. Another thing that I tried, and I will explain why, is I moved this to my 2-channel system. Still used it as a headphone amplifier, but in my 2-channel system, I usually use my Cord Hugo 2 as the primary DAC for that, and that is run through a Shit Saga, an OG, a Shit Saga preamp that has a vacuum tube in it too, and that's switchable between solid state and vacuum tube pre as well. And then through an Adcom GFA 555 Mark II into ELAC Unify UB52 speakers and a pair of SVS, there we go, SVS SB1000 subwoofers. And I moved it to that system and used one, the Saga preamp has 2 pair of RCA outputs. One pair goes through the subs and then into the Adcom, and then I put the other pair into one of the RCA inputs in this because I wanted to use the tube pre on that to test a thing that we will get to in just a moment. So there we go, is the system setups there. All right, so then let's actually talk about the sound, and this is going to be on the rougher side. Just going to level with you there. The reason is that the presentation here is aggressively overdamped, and that makes the sound, even with the tubiest mode selected, just relentlessly dry and overly sterile. And we'll unpack all of that here a little bit more. The sound signature, like in terms of like the perceived frequency response, kind of has the iFi house sound, where it's neutral warm in terms of perceived frequency response. Another strength of the sound is like there is a lot of power on the initial attack. So like even with the Susvara, which is really hard to drive, the initial hit of the sound wave is very fast and very aggressive. So there is a lot of slam, there is a lot of impact to the sound and that sort of thing. The imaging is pretty good. The separation is not great, and I think that is a part of the dryness and over damped nature. We'll get to that here in just a moment. part of that coming out anyway. But like the soundstage, it never really stood out to me as being huge or small. It's just there, kind of what it needs to be, kind of a thing. So the physicality of it, the initial attack and how much impact it brings is impressive and fun in its own right, and I think some people will really like that. But let's talk about that dryness and overdamped sound, because what happens, you combine the really aggressive initial attack of this with an overdamped, dry sound, and again, even with the fully tubed mode engaged. And what you get is just a very surface level, upfront presentation with no real depth behind it. So let's unpack that and let me try to explain what I mean by that. This amp is all attack, very little decay, basically. It hits hard initially, presents everything up front, and then there's just so little after that. I say it sounds overdamped because decaying ends of tones. The subtle stuff that happens after the initial attack of a sound. So things like room reverbs, okay? A lot of audience noise if you're talking about a live recording, okay? Subtle sounds of like the mechanics of an instrument returning to its initial state are just highly squelched. They are just really squeezed out of the sound here. And so what you get is like this almost discrete and granular kind of presentation, where it's just attack, nothing, attack, nothing, attack, nothing, attack, nothing, over and over and over again. And again, I need to stress that this is in even the full tube setting. It's even worse about that in the fully solid state mode. And then of course the one that's in the middle is in the middle, because I did check all of the modes. For me, the fully tubed mode was the least intolerable in this aspect that I'm talking about. And it's the mode that I did by far the most listening with, because it's the one that I could just sort of kind of stomach for a while. And I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I need to explain this so that you understand where I'm coming from on this one. And it's that if you put a drum kit in a room with this amp, you get a great initial presentation of stick to drum head, right? Like that initial attack is quick, it is snappy, it is dynamic. You feel it as much as you hear it. That's cool. You get none of the reverb coming off the room after that. You get very little of the drum resonance setting up after that initial attack. Like all of that stuff just really isn't here. Just really isn't here. To a very unnatural and unsettling way. Like it just sounds very artificial because of that. A lot of those subtle little characteristics that makes things sound real and natural are just overdamped. They are shut down and squeezed out of the presentation on this one. So it's almost like it has too much power, too much control, punches like the dickens right out of the bat, nothing behind it. Okay, like if you think about a boxer, if you can absorb that first big hit, there's no hit coming after that until the boxer winds up and just comes at you again. There's no hit, jab, jab. It's just hit, back off, hit, back off, hit again. It's very different in that way. All right. This stands in contrast to basically every other amp I have ever heard in the high end. That list right now includes, but is probably not limited to, my Bioelectric HPA V281, the Headamp GSX Mini, the Ferrum Orin Hypso stack, the Phonitor, the SPL Phonitor X, and then like on the tube side, I've heard the LTA Z10E and the MZ3, all that. So I mean, there are a few amps in there now, and this one very uniquely stands out in terms of how aggressively it damps the afters of the sounds. I don't really know how else to explain it other than that. Just does it to an insane degree, just all up front. Okay, I tried to fix that. So let's come back to me putting it into my 2-channel system with the Saga preamp. And I wanted to do that because I know that I have this really old RCA 6SN7 vacuum tube here. The model number has worn off, but I mean, it still says RCA electron tube, made in the USA, Radiotron, something. Hold it up here, give you a fairly good look at it. Somebody will probably be able to identify that. Anyway, the reason that I bring this out is because I know that this tube does the opposite of what the Pro iCAN does. This one really emphasizes the afters, right? So it's still pretty good on the initial attack, but it almost like underdamps everything. It lets the reverbs of an instrument, okay, like the acoustic resonances of it and all of that, linger a little bit too long. It lets room reverb sound louder and hang around longer than just about any other tube that I have heard. So it creates just like a very like kind of wet, syrupy kind of a sound to it, which the opposite of being too discrete is like too blended together without enough separation in it. So I figured, hey, let's put this in the Saga, then run the Saga into this, make sure the Saga is in tube mode, and maybe we would get a happy balance there. No. The Pro iCAN gonna Pro iCAN is basically what it comes down to, is that I kept switching my Saga between fully solid state and tube pre mode, and I could not hear the Pro iCAN change its presentation. I was using Susvara. That one is extraordinarily resolving. That's the most resolving headphone that I have. And I could not hear any meaningful difference in switching the Saga Pre from using this tube to being pure solid state. Again, even with the tube mode on this fully engaged at its max setting. And I was to the point where I was like, is this even working? And so then I plugged the speakers back in. I had to unplug them from the Saga because even though the AdCom was off, the subs were still live because they're on an auto wake up. So I plug those back in, fire up the AdCom amp to hear the speakers again, and I use this tube, switch back and forth between the Saga's tube and solid state mode, and yeah, I heard this thing changing the sound. I heard that lingering, those lingering decays, the warm, the thicker, syrupy, wet sound about it. Definitely heard it coming through, but not with the Pro iCAN. Okay. So I don't like this amp. I think it could be a really cool product if it wasn't so darn aggressive on the trailing ends of things. If it didn't have such an overdamped, dry sound, upfront surface level kind of sound to it, I would probably really like it. It's got a lot of cool features. The bass boost does help some headphones sound a little bit more full and fun in that way. So, I mean, the X-Bass does do a thing that can be really good. I never really used the crossfeed, but some people are really going to like it. It has plenty of power, at least initially. Makes the Susvara slam as hard as I've ever heard it slam. Okay, and which, you know, the Susvara actually can slam. It just takes a whole heck of a lot of power to do it, which this has initially. It just, that presentation choice there, I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I honestly think it was a mistake. And it's very unique. Again, I just listed a whole bunch of other high-end headphone amps that I have heard, and this one is just extremely unique in how overdamped and how much it squelches the trailing ends of everything. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. I can't recommend this one. I would say skip it. Hopefully they rework it and give us an edition that just doesn't do that. Okay, it sounds a little bit more. It's fine having the different tube settings in there. Just, you know, let's go from more natural to just, you know, slightly wet to wetter instead of just driest, drier, dry kind of a thing. Okay. All right. I'm Wave Theory. I'll leave it there. This has been my review of the Pro iCAN. No, I don't think it's worth the hype that I perceive it having. Skip this one, in my opinion. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below. If you haven't yet, like this video. If you haven't, if you think I'm wrong, feel free to tell me that too and explain why. Yeah, please check out my PayPal, my Patreon. Look for ways to support the channel, those kinds of things. And as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.